Welcome to episode 28 of the What Happens Next podcast, the podcast dedicated to think about well-being in our 50s and 60s as we approach the next chapter of our lives. And one of the subjects we often talk about as part of What Happens Next, and one that I think is really important to focus on, is health. And that's why I'm pleased to introduce Jamie Harrison as my guest on this week's podcast. Jamie is the owner of the Consistency Club and helps executives re-engineer their lifestyles to incorporate sustainable health habits. Now, Jamie thinks that consistency doesn't mean being 100% every day, but reframing what good looks like for you in your effort to improve your health. And we know that as we get older, our health plays an increasingly important part in the way we live our lives. And Jamie shares his 4-stage fitness process, which includes seeing where you are, doing the work, keeping on track by gathering data, and then working with Jamie and his team to help you make sure that you're making the most of your health. Now, we talk about a wide range of topics in this interview, including the importance of habits and internal behaviour, the steps you can take to build better habits, and looking at identity and the impact that it has on our lives. So without further ado, let's move on to the interview. Part of the issue we've got when we're thinking about what happens next in our lives is having the self-awareness, having the introspection to be able to think about what the gaps in our well-being are. And we're doing loads of work at the minute with What Happens Next to build solutions that are going to help you think about well-being in a nuanced way when you're thinking about how it applies to your life. One of the first things we've built that you can use today is our What Happens Next quiz. It's free to do, takes about 5 minutes, but what it will do is give you an insight into the areas of strengths when it comes to your well-being and the areas you might want to improve. You can take the What Happens Next quiz at whathappensnext.life/quiz, and I hope it helps you in your journey to work out what happens next for you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to What Happens Next Live, the show. Is it a show? I don't know. I don't know what LinkedIn Live is, to be honest. The show where we talk about well-being in a range of different aspects and what we need to consider when thinking about what happens next in our lives. I'm Chris Dames, your host. I'm a childhood financial planner, and I've worked with so many people, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, who have been evaluating their lives, thinking about what's next. And despite us thinking quite a lot about the question of, have I got enough money? They're wondering what's next in their lives. And what we do on What Happens Next is talk about some of the other factors you need to consider when thinking about what's next. And what we've done is built a framework. If you can share that for me, Russ. Thank you. Called the What Happens Next framework. Now, you can see this at www.whathappensnext.life. We believe that so when you're thinking about what happens next, it's worth considering all of these factors. Financial well-being, have I got enough? Intellectual and occupational well-being, am I thinking about what I'm going to do next to keep me mentally engaged? Social well-being, am I spending time with people I love and like in that element? Community well-being, am I helping? You know, one of the things we get from work when we're working is the desire and the ability to help others. Sometimes when we're thinking about what happens next, we miss that important component part. And purpose and values. What's the foundation of it all that we
what's important to us in our lives, and how do we make sure that when we're taking that next step, we're thinking about making sure that next step really speaks to us in terms of what's important to us. However, you could argue that what underpins it all is us being physically able to do all that. And often, when we're working so hard in our careers and our businesses, and funny enough, I was having a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. The area we neglect is our own bodies. So I'm really pleased to invite, thank you, Raj, you can stop sharing now. I'm really pleased to invite Jamie Harrison from the Consistency Coach, who's going to share with all of us what we probably need to think about when we're thinking about our own physical well-being. Jamie, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Very, very happy to be here. I'm excited for this conversation because I think there's
and I'm really excited to learn what I need to do.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you're doing okay.
Yeah, I'm doing okay, but there's always that room for improvement, isn't there? So I'm keen to learn. But before we start, Jamie, can you tell everybody watching all about you?
Yeah, of course. So naturally, as we tend to do as human beings, I'm going to start with what I do professionally. So obviously you can see by the name, the Consistency Coach, that's what I've dubbed myself. But I own a business called the Consistency Club, which the Consistency Coach came first. So I've been a health coach, personal trainer, then health coach since the age of 18, actually 17 when I started personal training. And the Consistency Club has birthed from my experience, both in that world in terms of health, well-being, fitness, and helping people. And I've done many other things, which maybe we get into in the health and fitness industry, and tested a few things, and my experience within the corporate world. And I've partnered those two things together to form the Consistency Club, which is an executive health coaching service. So we work one-on-one with executives, with leaders in business, C-suite level, even senior managers, to help them almost re-engineer their lifestyle in a way that, whether it's their time poor, their energy poor, they don't know where to start, they have low motivation, and build it into a sustainable system for them. So yes, results are super important, but how do you keep them for the long haul? And obviously people are at different stages within their life, whether they're in that high pressure cooker environment right now and they're really struggling to balance, or as you said, Chris, are they coming out the other end and starting to realize, okay, financially I've worked really hard for the situation that I'm in, but I have neglected my health, and that root will start to sprout at some point. So you need to address it. And what do you do? Like, where do you even start? So that's what I do. I am 27 years old. I've got a little baby boy on the way. Married to my wife Charlie, who we got together when 16, so childhood sweethearts, you could call us, and live in, I was about to say a sunny little place. It's definitely not a sunny little place. Southwest of the UK, in a little city called Gloucester.
Oh, Gloucester's lovely. One of my What Happens Next interviews last week, Jamie, was with a guy called George Kinder. And he was, we were doing the interview from, I was doing it from the office, but I'd been out and it was really wet and cold. He was doing it from his shed, which is a beach hut in Hawaii.
Oh, brilliant.
So I was like, okay, this is amazing. Can you show me the view so it's crystal around so I can have a look? But yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. When's the baby due?
2nd of May is the due date. So
how are you feeling about it?
I'm so excited, which I know there's probably an element of naivety when I say that statement, because I know what's to come. And funny enough, our close friends, they've got a week old and we went around to see them on the weekend and it was all a bit hectic. So I know what's to come, but yeah, super excited. From almost, as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be a dad, wanted kids. So I feel like it's, the next portion of my life. So really, really excited for it. It's just can't believe how quickly it comes around. It feels like 2 weeks ago I found out.
Yeah.
So
you're talking to somebody with a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old. So it's like it goes quick. One thing I would say, if you are watching live, we can see all your comments on LinkedIn. So feel free to post. Feel free if you'd like to ask questions. We love the engagement on What Happens Next because we want to actively help if we can and answer those questions. So, and feel free to, when we had Nick Elston on last week, there was a lot of love shared. So feel free to let us know if something resonates or if it's important to you, because I'd love to do that. Jamie, where I want to start is two elements, and these are based on conversations I had with fellow business owners, fellow fairly successful people who are not getting the balance right at the minute. And I literally only had these conversations last night, so this is why it resonates. One factor was finding time. So tell me a little bit about, you're working with a business owner or a senior leader. They've got a busy life. How do you make sure that they've got that time in the diary every week or whatever it may be to ensure that they maintain positive physical health?
Yeah, of course. It's a really important question, probably the most important question to start with if anyone's going to go on this journey. And just taking it back to the word consistency as a whole, because it's really important. It's why I named the business, or, name for naming sake of the business has the word consistency in it. By its very nature, consistency means it's impossible to be at 100% every single day. Like 100% looks different every single day. And that's the way I should reframe it. And what happens when we get to a position where, we ride these waves of high frustration and motivation, I would say, where, whether it's we're holding on to some extra pounds, we want to lose weight, we know we're not doing enough to improve or even maintain our fitness. We've gone through a really busy, stressful period. Maybe it's a product launch or whatever it may be within our careers. And you get to a point where the mind's telling you, I need to change, I need to change, I need to change. There's a lot of external or internal pressure on you. And often what we do in that situation is we get to a breaking point and we go, right, God, I'm changing, I'm doing it for myself. And regardless of how busy our lifestyle is, the responsibilities we have in our career, but even at home life, we're just talking about children, maintaining a social life, seeing parents, whatever it may be, there's a lot of responsibility there on us. So rather than reverse engineering, saying, where can I start and build? We do the opposite. We chuck everything to try find what sticks, and there's no sustainability in that method. So you end up getting to a point where you burn out. Now, what that burnout, it could happen in 2 weeks. For some people, it happens in 6 weeks, but it's inevitable. So you lose that kind of longevity of any result that you get. What that does when that process happens is it breaks down all confidence, one, you have in yourself and your ability to execute, but two, in your lifestyle. So naturally you go, well, I've tried, I've failed. My lifestyle doesn't allow me to do this. I'm just going to have to suck it up for a little bit. And that's just a self-limiting belief issue, almost preserving yourself from having to actually align some mental bandwidth. And it happens subconsciously because, anyone that's listening now, anyone who's a business owner, they understand like graft, hard work, the concepts of sustainability and making progress. It's just then applying them to their health. So I think, first of all, when you question how much time do I have, or if you've got that innate feeling in you, I don't have enough time, understand that starting small is the biggest thing. And actually, the really small nuanced decisions within your day can have a great impact without having to drive to a gym and spend an hour there, without having to prep meals every single night. Because sometimes, we've worked with people, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, they're on 4, 5, 6 planes a week, sometimes double that a week. So it's just finding a system that works for you.
Yeah. And I'd imagine if you're traveling quite a bit, finding something flexible enough you can do anywhere as well, right?
Exactly.
It's that element of how do I apply travel to your life. It's really interesting. One of the things that I'm writing about quite a lot for the sort of What Happens Next book is the danger of when we're thinking about any area of well-being in our life, but also that transition, selling your business, moving on, is that polarized thinking, that black and white element where we turn around and say it's nothing or all. And I think fitness is similar, isn't it? We give it a go 1,000,000% for 2 weeks, and then we find that it doesn't work. And that, as you say, adding the elements on incrementally so we can build up to fitness, I think is a really important point. And then the other conversation I was having yesterday that was really interesting was having a limited in time fitness goal, achieving that goal. So the conversation I was having was about weight loss. A friend of mine lost loads of weight for his daughter's wedding and then found that once that was done, he didn't have a goal anymore and the weight came back on. So how do we make sure that we're maintaining consistency despite us having fixed goals in time? Is it a matter of just setting other goals, or what do you think?
It's the classic, isn't it? You know, being motivated by the external goal that's going to drag us to the whether it's an event or, like you said, going away, top off on holiday or daughter's wedding, whatever it may be. And we're driven in that moment by the desire not to fail. I've got a specific date. It's holding me accountable. So essentially what you've done in that position, and this is an effective strategy and it's an element of what we do, you know, as providing coaching, is you've you found a source of external accountability to help you in that situation. Because usually and naturally, if we rely on internal accountability, that's why our health is the first thing to go. So first of all, like, I think it's a useful strategy to be able to utilize. Now, how do you maintain it after the event? I always say to clients, goal after the goal. But I think it's super important. And what I don't mean by that is, let's say you've booked a marathon and after that marathon you've booked another one. It's questioning the existential reason for why you're doing it. So yes, like we can, I'm fairly confident pretty much everyone could train for an event. God willing that they're able to train for an event, get there, complete the event. Maybe there'd be room for better performance and that'd be brilliant. Because they've had that date there, it holds them accountable. Remove that and just say, go and do that all again, but we're not booking a date. And there's probably 35% of people that would actually execute. So you have to then question, like, why outside of this event, why do you want to be fit and healthy?
Yeah.
And innately it goes back to, because it's the way we're all designed. I want to be fit when I'm older and, I want to see my children grow up or my grandkids grow up. I want to be able to play with them. My all-cause mortality, a risk of disease. I don't want to come across any heart disease or anything like that. It's stuff that we all say and we all know deep down, but because it's not an issue facing us right now in the present, smacking us in the face, it just sits there and idle in the background until something creeps up. So whether you try to stand up one day, your knee goes a little bit, or you go up a flight of stairs, you're out of breath, or the doctor says to you, we found a lump, whatever it may be, like anything within life. And then all of a sudden our mind is switched and we've got that external accountability again. So I think two things: an event is brilliant, but you have to have a plan after the plan. What are you going to do to sustain it? And secondly, understand that longevity and sustainability within health means you have to build this as a lifestyle. Yeah. This isn't event training. This isn't a phase. This is a lifestyle. And that comes back to understanding you as an individual, what your lifestyle is going to allow, what motivates you, what you like, what you dislike. And that will build the foundation for how that lifestyle is going to look.
Love that. Absolutely love that. I know you mentioned in terms of staying accountable, but also your fitness process. You've got a really super clear on the website. It's brilliant, by the way. Super clear 4-point process. Just talk us through that and talk to us a little bit about how each component part fits into somebody's fitness journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So stage one is always assessment. So that is assessment of their lifestyle. We call it the lifestyle assessment. So it's assessment of their work life, their home life, any previous injuries, any medical conditions, like any variable that makes us individual subjectively. And that's an important point to make. And I will get back to the 4 points because I appreciate you asking that. When it comes to health and fitness, every single person is different. So, fasting, I post quite a lot of content about fasting. I've just done a 72-hour fast. It's a brilliant solution, but not everyone reacts in the same way to it. Same as keto, same as the 5-2, same as HIIT workouts compared to hypertrophy sessions, compared to threshold workouts. Like, we're all so different that there's no cookie cutter thing that you can go online, copy and paste and try that's going to be perfect for you. So it takes some trial and error. So we always do that lifestyle assessment, and that builds the foundation of what we deliver to someone on day one of start day of the new them, like the new lifestyle. We've ensured that from that, like I said, with time they have available, what they like, what they dislike, their injury limitations, and how we're going to overcome those, their medical history, even like biomechanics, for example, which just, physiology wise, looking at them to assess if we give you a certain movement, is there potential for it not to be optimal for you? Some sciencey stuff that people don't necessarily need to worry about. And that builds a foundation. So we'll then go into delivery and we'll turn that solution on. So we'll flick the switch and say, right, from this date, from this Monday, this week, we're in your new lifestyle now. And then we go into a data gather. So we use our application and some fitness trackers and some native integrations to understand their health markers as we go through the process. Things like sleep, energy, blood pressure, heart rate variability, blood glucose levels in certain instances. And we compare all of this to the other data, base metric data like training steps, so depending on the training we've given them, and nutrition. Nutrition's obviously the biggest one. And what I tend to see, particularly with people, as we age through 40 plus, and, they've got busy lifestyles, massively under eating on protein. And that's not everyone. And those who have been more event focused will have understood the importance of protein for recovery. But it's a real issue for a lot of people. So we're in that early process. We're gathering data. We're assessing where are they at right now. And then we align that and we're analyzing that compared to what we've built for them. So there's usually a 2 to 3 week period where we're not changing anything. We're just understanding like where are their
where they are.
Exactly. Yeah. We then go into optimization. So once we've gathered that data and we have everything and we're communicating regularly and we understand, okay, what needs to be done now to improve your health trajectory, your longevity trajectory. And of course, like some people come to us and say, I want to lose, or I need to lose 30 pounds. So we do have specific goals in there. Some people are training for events, whatever it may be. So we'll optimize the program in terms of energy expenditure or energy balance, in terms of health markers. We're constantly tweaking that. So we tweak that weekly to ensure that we're always progressing. And then we go into the review phase and the accountability phase as such. So in review and accountability, so we're constantly reviewing the data all the time.
Yeah.
And super important is the accountability. Again, it goes back to installing that external accountability when it comes to whether you're still in that pressure cooker environment of running the business or whether you're stepping out. It takes a lot of mental bandwidth to sit down, and business owners will know what gets measured gets improved, but to sit down, understand what I'm doing, when am I doing it, why am I doing it, but also how am I tracking, measuring, and optimizing. Like it's a full-time job for me and I've got the skills to do it. At base level, all we're really taught is 5 fruit and veg a day, sleep 8 hours and get 45 minutes of exercise 3 or more times a week. That's literally it, which is sacrilege really. It should be a whole curriculum. But so it's just about understanding that we take the mental bandwidth away of having to plan. All you got to do is just execute on it and then trust in the process. And like I said, it looks different for everyone. And everyone's at different sort of levels when they come in, but there is a solution for everyone. So if anyone's ever thinking, even outside of the consistency, like people want to do it by themselves, if anyone ever has that innate feeling of I don't have the time for this, I can't do it, it's a self-limiting belief. Yes, there may be there's levels to the game and you may not be able to do as much as your next door neighbor, but you can start somewhere and then you build from there.
And I also think there's an argument in more personal effectiveness based on the level of fitness you've got. So, for me, being physically fit allows me to think better. What are the
100%.
connections between those two things, and how, in your experience of working with clients, what do they say to you about the sort of yes, they're losing weight and feeling better and they can climb up the stairs and do all that sort of stuff. What do they say about the other mental health and intellectual benefits of being in better shape?
Of course.
If this is the first time you've listened to What Happens Next, welcome to the show. we are committed to making sure that we do as much as we can to help you navigate whatever's next in your life. And there's a home for what happens next. What happens next life? We'd love for you to visit the site. On it, you will see loads of interviews, a link to take the What Happens Next quiz, an opportunity to sign up to the waiting list for the book, and much, much more. Take a look on the visit site, and we'd love to know what you think.
So glad you've asked that, because one, we always say focus on everything else. The physique comes as a byproduct. So never ever go into your journey just thinking I'm looking to lose weight. That's number one. You need to be looking at internals, health markers. How are you feeling? More importantly, in terms of the physiology, we're in a society now in which food is commoditized. It's no longer fuel. Food is a stressor for us. We rely on it as a bit of a stress release. We rely on it for pleasure. We dine out, we get a takeaway, we indulge in high saturated, high sodium, high carbohydrate processed foods. But you break it down, food is literally fuel, like putting unleaded into a car. That is what food is to us. So then you start to break down, okay, if I put
You're right, hold on, Jeremy. You're not going to take all the fun out of food, are you?
No. I'll get there.
Yeah.
And balance is key. And that's, let's cover that, because balance is so key. But when you break it down to baseline, you do get, like, this the old saying, you are what you eat. You do get in what you put out, basically, or get out what you put in. So if you're consuming super high carbohydrate diet, high sodium, high sugar, you're going to feel rubbish internally. From a cognitive standpoint, and there's so many subjects to cover, from breath work, nutrition, training, your circadian rhythm and your sleep patterns. Like, there's a lot of variables to feeling good and good cognition. But all of them will push oxidation, like oxygen to the brain, oxygen around the body. So like, in terms of waking up, you wake up with more vitality. If you get your circadian rhythm in sync and your body starts to understand the pattern, which isn't always possible, of I roughly go to sleep this time and I roughly get to get up at this time, your body will sink in. So when you wake up as you come up from a sleep cycle into light sleep, and you'll get out of bed feeling refreshed. That's number one. There's nothing worse than jumping out of bed and just feeling groggy. Never ever snooze the alarm, by the way, because you put yourself back into a sleep cycle. And that is why when you come up from the alarm, you feel more tired than if you had just got up.
That's a great tip. Yeah.
So never snooze the alarm, maybe on a Sunday. And then when it comes to nutrition, of course, like you get out what you put in. So if you get rubbish out, if you're consuming a really high carbohydrate diet, but you're not running a 10K that day or putting yourself through a massively 2.5 hour intense workout like an athlete will, you're just going to store it as glycogen. You get energy dips from doing so. Your body consumes a lot of energy trying to digest and process and partition carbohydrates, as it does protein, process called thermogenesis. But what it does when you consume carbohydrates, it will drain blood from your brain essentially down to the digestive system. So that feeling, maybe at lunchtime, people dive into a big bowl of rice or pasta, whatever it may be, or bread, some white bread in the sandwich, and you get that kind of lull post lunchtime. There's no productivity, a dip in energy, you get a bit of brain fog, you can't really think. That's why you're pulling all of the nutrients, oxygen and blood away from your brain to where your body needs it to digest.
Broadly speaking, so there's 3 component parts: nutrition, exercise, sleep. Right, they're the 3 that we need to focus on. One question I wanted to ask you was, we talked a bit about barriers. So we've talked about time. We talked about having a goal and then losing the motivation after the goal. What are the other main barriers you think prevent people from taking that first step, or prevent the fact that they lose consistently? Consistency, sorry.
No, of course. To be honest with you, most of the other barriers in almost all occasions are internal, and they're self-limiting beliefs. So alongside with like the feeling of lack of time, which in some days is a real world issue, It's actually the lack of confidence. When I talked about earlier on in the example, people lose confidence in themselves and their ability to execute. This is why we do a lot of work inside the Consistency Club on box ticking and habit building, because when you do that, you start to build, I reference it as a self-respect bar. We all have a self-respect bar in our day, and there are numerous things that build it. Something as simple as taking the bins out when I told the missus or your partner that I was going to do it, for example, something you wouldn't even think about as being any value to you. If you don't do it on time, or she has to nag you to do it again, little things like that will knock down your self-respect bar. Getting in and doing a workout, if you said I'm going to find 20 minutes to do so today, consuming that extra bit of chocolate after your tea in the evening when internally your mind's going, don't do it, but the cravings are there.
Anyway,
all these things serve to knock down our self-respect bar, and you can build them up by habits. So getting up on your first alarm, so you build a habit system, and what that does is you start to back yourself. It means I can speak and I believe what I'm saying and I will execute on what I'm saying. But a lot of people come and, they look at the lifestyle, and although they know they want to do something, they know they need to do something, and there may be a way to make it work, they lack self-confidence in their ability to execute, and they don't want to let me down, their partner down, themselves down, whatever it may be. That's a huge issue for a lot of people.
One of my favorite books on habits is Atomic Habits by James Clear. Brilliant book, and certainly made me think about the stories that I tell. I read it a few years ago, made me think about the stories that I tell myself about my life. It doesn't make me any more coordinated on a football, by the way. I'm still rubbish. My fitness has definitely improved since then. And one subject that's really important in that book is rebuilding our identity. Rebuilding our identity as not somebody who's out of shape and can't move, but rebuilding our identity as somebody who can do stuff. What part does identity and the stories we tell ourselves play in our fitness journey, do you think?
Oh, it's up there. It's massive. In fact, I would say it's fundamental. Like you said, like the principle within Atomic Habits is exactly what you say. You, rather than looking at habits, looking at the identity of who you are and who you want to be, and then building the habits around that to make sure they facilitate you being the person you want to be. That's such an important concept. How many times, whether it's a friend who's overweight, has that friend joked about being overweight to you and they laugh it off and they make an excuse, or, they go for another glass of wine and they joke about having a glass of wine. When you see that, it's because internally there's discomfort to the environment. Like intrinsically there's discomfort. So externally they're trying to project that they're not really bothered. It's all fun and games. So it comes back to that identity. They're almost just accepting they're that individual that makes those decisions. That their identity is to be overweight, or their identity is to be the busy business owner that struggles to make time for their family, let alone their health. And you have to break away from that, because again, it goes back to self-limiting beliefs, understanding that we evolve as people, our mindset evolves, and so physique-wise, our lifestyle evolves. So
it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I think, I'm 46. I'm looking at what I want for the next 10 years of my life, and part of the What Happens Next project, even though we know it's going to benefit the people who are thinking about what happens next now, is so I can work out what happens next as well. So hopefully this will be useful for me too. But I suppose the interesting thing there is, when I look at what I wanted 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or particularly 10 years ago, 15 years ago when we started the business, it keeps on changing. It's an ever-evolving feat, isn't it? And it's about sort of revisiting those things and going, well, who do I want to be now? I suppose the big thing as well is doing stuff that makes us feel uncomfortable, because it is easier to sit on the sofa and eat biscuits. Not that I'm decrying that. I've done that plenty of times myself.
Yeah, me both.
But how much of the work you do is about proving to the people you work with that they can actually do it if they try? How much of that is about building that sort of muscle of resilience, do you think? Do you think that plays a part?
100%. It plays a massive part. I talk about in the early stage momentum. I know it's cliche to say momentum's the most powerful force in the universe. What happens when people tend to go on their own journey? And it goes back to what we said at the very beginning of this, is they start really big and burn out. What that does when they start big, they get really quick, instant gratification of results, and that builds momentum, but the momentum doesn't take you anywhere. So what we're trying to do is a really delicate dance between starting small and building up, but generating enough result in the beginning that it facilitates the mindset switch that, okay, this system is working. I can actually fit this in around what I'm doing, and we've probably got some room to scale up. And as soon as you unlock it, it's a huge psychological shift for people. And it usually happens within the first, some people within the first week, some people within the first 3 weeks, but they'll reach out or get a message, or we're on our call, and they'll be like, I've got it today. Like I understand it. Like when you've been banging on to be about momentum and habits, and we're building this system in this early phase, and everything you're saying before now, it's been words, and I've just been going along with it. And now it's clicked, and I feel it. And that's once you've achieved that, they're on the journey, and they will inevitably be, whether it's now or in 10 years' time, a better individual with better health.
Yeah.
So it takes, and everyone's slightly different.
And it's interesting because you talk about momentum as the law of the universe. I'd suggest as a financial planner that compounding was the sort of unknown law of the universe. But actually, they're both exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Small incremental actions built over time make a big difference, right? That's all it is. And actually, in so many aspects of our life, that's what's important.
And do you know what? It's so interesting. I was on a call with Owen yesterday, who's in our BIP 100 group.
Yeah.
And the one thing I said to him, and he was showing these compounding graphs of how Warren Buffett is traded from the age of 11 up to, what is he now, 89 or something like that. And the first thing I said to him, every graph you've shown me for every stock or S&P 500 or his trading graph is exactly the same as a fat loss graph. If I opened our solution now, and you show, and it's not just about fat loss in the process. It could be about health markers or resting heart rate, but it's never ever linear. You have peaks and troughs, whether you've got things in your lifestyle that are dictating that, or whether it's just the internal system the body's going through. So it's understanding that, there are highs and lows. You have weeks where you've got real momentum, you're riding a wave of motivation, you've got a little bit more time, and then you've got weeks where maybe you're going to do some speaking, or you've got to travel for business and you're away from home, you're in hotels, you've not got access to the gym kit, you can't prep your meals, you're eating out. And for a lot of people, when they're taken away from the routine, that is what makes them crack, and they go, I just can't do this. I'll get to it next week, and next week never comes. So it's just about understanding, okay, my level of execution, or my definition of 100%, going back to 100%, metaphor, has changed now. So yes, I'm really operating at a lower level, but I can still tick over. I can still make positive actions, make small positive decisions. And when I come through this week, I'm back. It's just about,
there's never a straight line, is there? There's variability in every aspect of our life, but it's about getting cut. One of the things that we always talk about, and actually part of our sort of onboarding process with clients, is talking about being comfortable with volatility and change in our lives, and actually just continuing having that focus on the longer term plan is really important. I doing the research for this interview, as I do for every interview, I was having a look at your website, and this is why it's so pertinent we're having this conversation today, because I know you've got loads of testimonials from people who are making positive change in a period of their life where they are thinking about what happens next, and come and speak to somebody like me about their money and thinking about sort of navigating positive change. What would you say to somebody who said they'd left it too late?
It's never too late. It's never too late to improve. And this, again, it goes back to your identity and your mentality. If you let that thought and limiting belief foster, and that's your perspective, like our perspective is our reality in this world, realistically. So change your perspective. Just because you are, let's say hypothetically, 65 or 70 years old. You can still make improvements. There's huge improvements that can be made. Don't resign yourself to the fact that in your 30s, even 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, you weren't optimal, whether it's, I've always smoked or I've always eaten out or whatever it may be. I've never really exercised. It doesn't mean you can't make a positive change. That positive change is still going to have an impact.
But the way that you framed it is really interesting, because I think the challenge is there's that comparison to somebody who's been training all their life and is in super fit. Actually, that's not the goal, is it? The goal is just that internal improvement from where you sit. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. It's about unfortunately, I say unfortunately, like the world we live in is brilliant. We can sit down and do these podcasts and we can see some cool stuff on social media, but we're more connected than everyone else than we've ever been, right? We can log in on Monday morning and, as you said, or you can do a podcast with someone in Hawaii in a beach hut. That's a really good example.
Yeah.
So what that allows us to do is be connected with people we don't know, situations we don't know. Maybe that we feel like they're in better situations to us and we compare. And it's the same story when it comes to our health. You might see someone a similar age to yourself, you're on your commute home at 8 p.m. because you didn't get home to have tea with the kids and you couldn't get a fair workout in because business was busy. And you see a guy similar sort of age to you running past at, what looks like 10 miles an hour, and he's all in all the gear, and you're like, do you know what? I've got no chance. Understanding everyone's situation is different. Everyone's genetics are different. Their lifestyles, the variables are so different. So understanding it's your journey. And if you can just beat yourself 1% every single day, I know it's so cliche, then you're making progress and
it's
you're
on
the right
isn't
path.
It?
And it's a win. Yeah. Exactly.
Love that. I know we've spoken about it a bit, and that element of sort of data that comes into play that, as you say, there are, even though there are downsides to the modern world, the one thing that I found really useful in terms of my fitness journey is just having access to some data, just having access to information and being able to sort of track how I'm getting on. Now, I keep it super simple, right? I keep it super simple. I've got a little heart rate monitor. I use a MyZone. I've only got it in the office because I cycle to work and I don't want to lose the points. So every time I do a piece of exercise, it's on. And what's weird is that it works twofold for me. Number one, it tracks my heart rate, so allows me to show how much effort I'm making or not making. And then the other element is that actually it gamifies it and keeps it fairly competitive. Talk to me about the data that we should be thinking about tracking in our fitness journey and how we might do that.
Yeah, of course. Just to preface before I go into the actual data itself and the metrics to look for, like, knowledge is power. If you have no view on your internal health markers until you get a checkup from the doctor, or maybe you got boob or whatever it may be, you are literally completely blind. Like treat your health as the business either they're selling or they're leaving or you're running right now. You wouldn't get to the end of the month or the end of a quarter and turn up to a meeting to sit down and assess the accounts and revenue and gross and net, etc. And someone goes, so how have we done? And you're like, don't know, not sure. Feels like we've done all right. Everyone's been busy. You wouldn't do it, would you? It's sacrilege within business. But with our health, you get to the end of the month, no metrics tracked. Either you've not done much or you've done just exactly what you did last month in terms of intensity and effort. So what the data allows you to do is see, one, where's my baseline, and are there any major issues that I need to address right now?
And that's why that assessment stuff at the start when people work with you is so important, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And secondly, am I improving what I'm doing? So standard resting heart rate, very, very important metric. Track your resting heart rate and understand where it should be within your relative age bracket, within your weight, gender. Secondly, heart rate variability. So, some people know what HRV, the abbreviation, is. Some people don't. I'll summarize it very, very briefly. Heart rate variability is the latency or the time difference between your heartbeats. So let's say your heart's beating 60 beats per minute. The time between those beats is never consistent. And I say never consistent, shouldn't be consistent. So so a high heart rate variability is actually more variability, more latency between those heartbeats, which kind of goes psychological.
So less consistency of heartbeat in terms of rhythm. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying?
So
that I've never heard that before. Why is that? Why is that important? Why is that? Why is that a factor we should track?
Yeah, of course. So like heart rate variability is dictated by our autonomic nervous system. And they are our sympathetic and our parasympathetic. So our sympathetic is our fight or flight, our adrenaline cortisol response, need to get us out of a situation, stressed at work, need the energy, whatever it may be. That's our sympathetic. So when we're high stress, slightly sweating, maybe our heart rate's elevated, we're in our sympathetic. Parasympathetic is our rest and digest. So we're sitting down, we're chilling out, and they send different signals. So if the sympathetic is sending a stronger signal than the parasympathetic, that's when we get a low heart rate variability, and therefore more consistent time between the heartbeats. And the reason that happens is because your body's producing a stress response. So it needs, like, heart rate needs to increase. It needs consistency within those heartbeats. It needs to be efficient at flooding as much blood and oxygen around the body. So you've got that stress response. Parasympathetic sends us a different signal. And that signal allows, lower resting heart rate, the body's relaxed, there's less intensity. And so the latency between the heartbeats can fall into a little bit more of a natural pattern in which there is usually more variability. So a high heart rate variability, good. Low heart rate variability,
interesting.
Bad. Yeah. And that, I've coached people who've had heart rate variability of like 120 milliseconds. And I've coached people who have had a high of 120 milliseconds, and I've had people who are a high of 18. So like everyone genetically is different. And that's important.
I'm probably the only one thinking about this right now, but I'm thinking like I'm thinking of a drum beat, and what we need is like a bit more jazz animal. Sort of like just all like. And how do you track that? Is that through a heart rate monitor and what data?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, to be honest, most fitness trackers now incorporate heart rate variability. So whether it's a Garmin, a Whoop, which I've got all the tech here. Whoop strap's brilliant. I think all new Apple Watches will track heart rate variability now. Fitbits, Polar. So it's a key metric for a fitness tracker. All of them will give you that data. And just going back to its importance outside of your health. So of course, like, it's a key indicator to the strain on your heart. If you've got a consistent low heart rate variability, it means the sympathetic is constantly sending a stronger signal, which means your resting heart rate will be slightly higher. The work of the heart is intensified. But also it tells you internally what's going on. So your heart rate variability and that sympathetic can be switched on because of load or stressors within the body. Now they come in different forms. They could be an intense workout your body's trying to recover from. I can't remember who is it that said, but they said if you strapped up someone when they were doing an intense workout and just showed the data, like the ECG, to a physician, they would think you were dying if you just didn't show them what you did. So it's interesting to understand that as a concept. Like, working out is a form of load, but it's measured load. It's in the, it's going to benefit us in the future. So within that heart rate variability data, what you'll see is a sign, which is sending a stronger signal. If it's consistently low, there's a strain in the body, which could either be an intense workout or trying to recover from that workout. You could have an illness that your body's either fighting off or has already presented itself again that your body's trying to deal with. It could even be an internal, like, stress at work. If you're getting slightly less sleep and you're in a stressful period, like I said, project launches, whatever it may be, then that can have an effect as well. So load, strain, and stress comes in many different forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be, I feel really stressed right now. It presents itself within the body. So understanding that means you can work and adopt your body's stress response. So if you've got an important meeting to go to where you've got to be really cognizant, for example, what you don't want to do is put your body in a position of low heart rate variability, you've increased the strain. Sometimes it can happen, but you've increased the strain. You go into that situation with a low heart rate variability. Naturally, your stress response is going to be lesser to that environment. Cognitively, you may be not as sharp. Your energy levels are going to be lower, and you're just not primed as the best version of yourself. So, outside of just your health and your heart health and your physiology, understanding how to be the best version of yourself every day, whether that's to be around with your kids or within business, it's a useful tool for that as well.
Amazing, love that. Two things I want to talk to you about. Number one is when we first met, we had a conversation about different types of exercise and how to get the balance right. So I'm guilty because I've sort of did quite a lot of running over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I'm really guilty of just going cardio, and I've incorporated a little bit more weights into the mix. I'm ashamed to say I do no flexibility at all. Like I do a stretch at the. I'm one of those runners who just goes, right, I'm gonna get your trainers off, I'm off.
Yeah.
And then I come back and I don't do the stretching. But actually I've sort of started slowly to incorporate a bit more yoga and a bit more really intentional stretching into my exercise routine. Help me understand the importance of those three. Is there anything missing that people need to include in the exercise routine? And what's the most appropriate balance typically?
Yeah, of course. So, like, people tend to lean into what they've always done, and they usually always do what they do because they enjoy it. So, there's an element of like, if you've got any consistency or sustainability system, then you need to enjoy it. So, I think that's important to
Yeah.
know. Mobility work is absolutely essential, particularly as we age, for injury prevention. If you're
Yeah.
constantly going into a situation where there's no elasticity in ligaments, you've got poor, maybe like joints have slightly calcified, you've got really poor flexion or mobility in those joints, you've then got super tight muscles. That's when you run into issues. Maybe it's even like plantar fasciitis, your Achilles hurting, your tibia, whatever it may be. Just talking running there more specifically, you'll come a cropper to injuries, and when you're in a position of poor mobility and not necessarily you haven't strengthened the areas that you need to recover from that is not impossible. But these injuries drag on, and then you feel like you're ready, you go and do it again, and then they crop up again. And I think lower back pain or knee pain or shoulder pain are probably some of the main culprits when it comes to injuries that prevent people or hold people back from exercising. But there's a very unique balance that is needed. If we're just talking about longevity, you need to balance heart rate zonal training, in a method that you enjoy, and resistance training and mobility work.
Yeah.
And please do not. I think some people fall into the category like they segment resistance training like, oh, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. I don't want to put on loads of muscle. I can't tell you how hard it is to develop muscle. It's so much harder than you think. You're not going to get into a situation where you've trained for 6 months, you've put on 5 kilos of muscle, and you can't run. Like, it does not work like that. So what you need to be doing, working through the heart rate zone. So some zone 2 work every single week. So sitting in the zone 2 of the heart rate, ideal for fat oxidation. Build a bit of a base whilst doing that. That could be cycling, that could be running at, longer distance, slightly shorter pace or cadence. You then want to work through the zonal threshold. So into zone 3, into zone 4, and you need to ideally try and spike to zone 5 at some point within the week as well. So to give an example,
explain the zones. Somebody who
of course.
No.
So you've got five heart rate zones, and they are essentially at different thresholds within building up to your max heart rate. And how much time do we spend in each of those zones dictates the energy system that we use. So zone 2, it's aerobic, like a oxidizing fat, oxygen, and then we eventually starts to switch to anaerobic as we go through. Now, naturally, the higher you get, like, you can't stay at zone 5 for very long. So that's when interval work comes in.
You know what? On the app that I use, they color code it really interestingly. So it starts off. If I put my ab on now, it would be like light grey, and then it goes
Yeah.
dark grey, blue, green, yellow, and red.
Yeah.
And like when it gets to red, I am literally like you talked about the guy dying before. I
Yeah.
literally think this is just no longer sustainable. But I feel better for it after I've done it.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and it's
Yeah.
that element, and that's what we're talking about: the intensity and the impact on the heart rate, isn't it?
Exactly. So you could go and do a zone 2 run or cycle or row, for example, and you could sustain it for obviously different level of fitness, but you could sustain it for an hour, for example. If you're working through zone 4 and zone 5, there's no way you could ever sustain zone 4, zone 5. Maybe zone 4 for longer, but definitely not zone 5 for any period of time like that. So you have to dip into it, maximum sort of 30 seconds, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, and then you're back down again. So that's when you're using that intervals to actually spike through the thresholds.
Gotcha.
So let's just break it down. If we were to do 3 sessions a week, just 3 sessions a week. So one long zone 2 training session. We then have in between a full body resistance training session. So that's working, different muscle fiber types. So we've got some explosive work in there, some strength work, some hypertrophy work. The good thing with the resistance training, although it's not direct mobility work, you are putting the muscle in the joint through an active range of motion under load. It keeps you mobile, it keeps you more supple, but it means you strengthen the areas as well. It's even brilliant for bone density, which as we age is super important. So we're building and developing strength within those muscles, within those joints, within those tendons. We're putting them through an active range of motion, which means when you go, let's say running, for example, I can't tell you the positive impact resistance training would have on your ability to run. But people see it as, it's going to take away from doing that.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
It will massively boost performance. And then let's say, so we've done Monday, we've done Wednesday. Friday, we're doing our threshold work. So we're building up to zone 5. So we've got, just use an example of a treadmill here because it's a good system to utilize. We're on the treadmill, you're warming up to sort of 5 minutes, just gentle jog. And then you were to set the speed. So you increase the speed. Obviously, we're using our trackers, we're monitoring our heart rate until the point your heart rate, you're running quickly, your heart rate is peaking, like high zone 4, zone 5. Sustain that for as long as we feel like it's feasible, or have a tracking system in place that says, I want you to do it for this long until you stop. And then either turn the speed down on the treadmill and sustain that for 2.5 minutes, and then repeat that system, or stop completely. So jump off the treadmill, leave it running, jump off the treadmill, let the heart rate come back down, and then we're back on and we're spiking the heart rate again. So we've got 3 really balanced workouts that almost cover all bases there. You add in between, because mobility work doesn't need to take half an hour. You could do 5 to 10 minutes a night.
Stretch on every, just stretch, right?
First thing in the morning, or whilst you're watching TV at night, or the football game, or a bit of rugby, whatever it may be, you can quickly get on the carpet and do 1 round of full body stretches, and that's more than 90% of people are doing. It's going to have a positive impact. You do those things. That. Yeah. And obviously not everyone can work out 3 days a week plus the mobility work. So it's finding out, like, how do I balance it for me?
Well, it's keeping my 12-year-old off my back because I'm doing a sort of downward dog or stretch on the thing. That might be an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
Lastly, we've talked a bit about wearables and apps, and I want to sort of explore a little bit about that. We've talked about the technology need to track, but how do we make sure? Because we've talked about avoiding comparison, but maintaining an element of competition being important, even if it's with ourselves. How do we make sure that we're getting the most of the apps that we're wearing and it's not a distraction from what we actually need to do?
Yeah, that comes down to data analysis. What happens for a lot of people is we get shiny object syndrome when it comes to tech. We all like a little bit of tech, whether it's a new, fitness watch or smartwatch or fitness tracker, and we wear it. And, take Whoop, for example. Whoop, when you log into it in the morning, the first thing it gives you is a massive color-coded recovery score. You are this % recovered, which, is great and it provides value. But if you're not going deeper into the systems, taking some time to sit down with it, maybe get it up on the desktop and go, okay, what compared to last month or last week, what was I doing? Have I improved? Have I not? And actually utilizing the data, essentially all it serves as is a bit of tech that sits on our wrists and tells us information that we don't do anything about. Like the amount of people that will look at that information and go, I need to work out today because I can't work out over the next 2 days. They'll do it anyway, even if recovery is poor, which isn't always, it's not the worst thing to do, but because there's no system that's tracking and optimizing, there's not a whole lot of value.
But it's what lessons can we learn from the previous history, right? And the progress we've made, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just, like you said, understanding, okay, you'll see peaks and trends and looking at that peak and then referencing it back to whether it's training or sleep or what you ate that week and going, how do I replicate that? What was I doing then that I didn't do now? And sometimes you'll be doing exactly the same, and an illness is, your body's fighting off an illness and your health markers are down. Like we always said, it's never a linear line, but you'll see, success leaves clues, as we always say, and it's the same with our health. You'll see a trend, and then it's just implementing more of what you did to facilitate that, the same as you would in business, like test, experiment, and double down on what works.
There's measure and then change.
Exactly.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Jamie, thank you for your time today. I've learned a lot, which I really appreciate, and hopefully you have, if you're watching too. Jamie, where can people find out more about your work?
Yeah, of course. Again, just want to say thank you very much for having me on. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. So you can find us at www.theconsistencyclub.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jamie Harrison, Instagram at _consistency_coach, and Jamie Harrison -- the consistency coach on Facebook.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. And I hope you've learned a lot if you're watching, and you have a lovely day.
Thanks, everyone.
Soon. Bye.
I really hope you enjoyed that interview. And I know that podcasts are brilliant because when you're on the go, you can listen wherever you want. However, if you've got a few minutes, and like me, you're a bit more of a visual learner, you might want to visit our YouTube channel at What Happens Next Live. There'll be a link in the comments as well so that you can find us. And what I really appreciate you doing, we've got all the interviews on there, all the interviews you're listening to right there on there. But what we've also done is recorded exclusive content specifically for the YouTube channel that you can watch and get more insights into the next stage of your life and navigating it successfully. I'd ask a favour while you're there, if you can, like the videos you like, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us help more people. Thank you.